Hunters have a bunch of great builds, but I picked out 5 incredible builds that stand above all the others. So in this video, I'm going to go over all of these builds and show you how to make them for yourself. I'm Marshix and I make videos. If you enjoy, leave a like down below because my channel is dying. Also, all the in-depth builds will be in the description if you just want to copy and paste mine. This build nukes entire waves of enemies and turns you invisible at the same time. Stylish Executioner will turn you invisible each time you kill a debuff target. Then, if you pair this with Gerfalcon's Hauberk, you will gain volatile rounds each time you emerge from invisibility. Volatile is considered a debuff, so you just need to go invisible one time to create an infinite loop, where you turn invisible to gain volatile rounds, then kill a volatile target to turn invisible again, and then repeat the cycle. Now, this loop is not new, but it has gotten much better with the introduction of prismatic and exotic class items. Spirit of Gerfalcon is available on Hunter class items, which means you can still use the volatile loop in addition to having things like Spirit of the Assassin to turn invisible, Spirit of Foe Tracer for an easy damage buff, or Spirit of Galanor to get your supers back a lot faster. It doesn't really matter what you get as your second perk, but my point is, this is just a free perk on top of Gerfalcon's, so you might as well use the class item. Now, the exotic weapon we're using is Graviton Lance. This is because 1, it's a void weapon, which is required for volatile rounds, and 2, it already creates massive chaining explosions with every kill, so adding more explosions makes it way better. Since we are on Prismatic, we can use a bunch of fragments that we don't have access to on Void. Facet of Hope to get our class ability back faster while we have an elemental buff like Invisibility, Radiant, or Amplified. Facet of Balance to get melee energy from kills with Graviton Lance. Facet of Dawn to become Radiant with every melee hit. Then for extra survivability, I have Facet of Protection for a damage resistance, and Facet of Blessing to trigger health regen after melee kills. And this will activate off grapple punches, so you'll be taking advantage of it a lot more than you would think. For the other aspect, we have Ascension to make our class abilities jolt things, which will turn us invisible, and it also makes us Amplified, which triggers Facet of Hope for faster class abilities, so we can use this ability more often. Now you just use Ascension or a melee to become invisible. That will start the infinite volatile loop, then destroy things with Graviton Lance and turn invisible after every kill. Here are all the mods I'm using, and the full build will be in the description if you want to check it out. This next build does some of the highest damage in the game, and it revolves around Celestial Nighthawk. I've gone over a few iterations of this build in the past, but this is by far the best. Celestial Nighthawk turns your Golden Gun into one really powerful shot, making it deal more damage, and it all happens instantly. Also, kills with Golden Gun will give you a third of your super back, and precision kills with weapons will reduce the cooldown of your super, so you can get your Golden Guns very quickly. Now, we're going to pair this with Still Hunt, the exotic sniper rifle that shoots Golden Gun shots. These Golden Gun shots are the exact same as the Golden Gun super, meaning they are also affected by Celestial Nighthawk. So instead of 3 shots, you can get 1 stronger shot. And yes, Still Hunt did get nerfed, so instead of dealing 1 billion damage, it only does 900 million. But that's still more than everything else. Now, my previous builds have used a solar subclass, but this time we're using Prismatic. This is because we have access to a bunch of other abilities to maximize our damage. So we're using Facet of Dawn to become Radiant after a melee, and this is important because it does increase the damage of Golden Gun. We also have Facet of Dominance to weaken enemies with our Void Grenades, so they'll take 15% more damage from everything. And the same thing with Snare Bomb. Facet of Courage will make our Golden Gun deal a little bit more damage against enemies with Darkness debuffs, which we are applying with Winter Shroud. And we have Facet of Grace to get Transcendence faster from kinetic weapons, and Transcendence is another damage buff. And finally, we want Facet of Hope to get our class abilities back faster. And the reason we want that is because Acrobat's Dodge will make us Radiant even if we don't have a melee going into a boss fight. And the reason why I'm using Stylish Executioner is because this will give us another source of weaken just by punching an enemy while invisible. So we have multiple ways to become Radiant and multiple ways to debuff. But Still Hunt isn't the only weapon we're using because I'm going to teach you how to further increase your damage. You'll want a rocket launcher with either auto-loading holster or reconstruction. And it's best if it's a solar weapon so you can double up on your solar surges and solar scavengers. So they'll benefit both Still Hunt and your rocket launcher. So the way this works is you shoot all your rockets, then you swap to Still Hunt and dump all your ammo, reload Still Hunt, and then that will give your rocket time to reload itself so you can dump your rockets again. Then swap back to Still Hunt and continue the cycle. This makes it so you will only have to reload Still Hunt while you're still getting the damage of your rocket. And you can take this one step further using solar holster mods. This will make it so you never have to reload either of your weapons. Solar holster will make it so Still Hunt reloads an extra 1 or 2 shots while you're shooting your rocket and throwing your abilities. This extra shot is important because popping Cade's Retribution will automatically reload Still Hunt. Long story short, this fills up Still Hunt just enough to get Cade's Retribution before you have to reload. So you can basically never reload either of your weapons during an entire damage phase. So just become Radiant from a dodge or a melee, then apply a debuff with your Smoke Bomb, Grenade, or Stylish Executioner, then swap back and forth with Still Hunt and your rocket launcher, and at some point squeeze in a Golden Gun for even more damage. And once again, the full build will be in the description. This next build turns a simple hand cannon into one of the strongest weapons in the game. Once again, this build has been around for a long time, but Prismatic takes it to a new level. Lucky Pants will increase the damage of your hand cannons up to 600% more damage. Pulling out a hand cannon will give you a legally modded holster for about 6 seconds. While you have this, hits with hand cannons will give you a stacking damage buff, and at 10 stacks, you deal 7 times damage. So this is what we're building around. We want a hand cannon that can build up stacks quickly and output the most damage possible, which is why we're using Malfeasance. Malfeasance is a hand cannon that creates taken explosions after every 5 shots. This can stun unstoppable champions, and it does a good amount of damage too. And since this is one of the fastest firing hand cannons, you'll be building up stacks a lot faster, and therefore you'll get the most damage out of Lucky Pants. This also has a catalyst that gives it Vorpal Weapon, which isn't a whole lot of damage on heavy weapons, but it is on hand cannons, because this is a 20% damage buff against all bosses. 0 setup necessary, you just deal more damage. And technically Warden's Law is better, but that's a 2-round burst hand cannon, and those are just kind of annoying. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, because we have multiple buffs and debuffs to further increase the damage of Malfeasance. For the buffs, we have 3 kinetic weapon surges for 22% more damage just by having armor charges, Radiant for a 25% damage buff, and we can get that from either Acrobat's Dodge or Facet of Dawn with a melee attack, and a 5% damage buff while you're in Transcendence. And we'll be getting Transcendence relatively quickly thanks to Facet of Grace, making Malfeasance fill up both sides a little bit faster. Now for the debuffs, we have Snare Bomb to apply Weaken, Facet of Dominance to make our Void Grenades apply Weaken, and most importantly, Tether to suppress and apply a 35% weaken to everything inside. And since this does suppress, we can run Facet of Command to automatically reload your weapon whenever you pop your super. Not entirely necessary, but it is nice to have. Besides that, we have Facet of Protection for a damage resistance, and both of the aspects are completely up to you. But let's be honest, these two are kinda OP. So just become Radiant and weaken your target, then swap to Malfeasance and start ramping up your damage. This is extremely powerful against champions, and it's an excellent damage option too whenever you're out of heavy ammo or need to conserve ammo. And if you have a full fire team running this build, you can melt certain bosses with just a hand cannon. Okay, real talk for 15 seconds. The Destiny player base is really low right now, so my income is really low right now. So if you see any extra sponsors on the channel, that's why. And I don't like asking for donations or channel members, but to the few people who have done that, thank you so much. I mean, I'm a man, I don't have feelings. You can punch things really hard. 1-2 Punch is a perk on legendary shotguns. Each shot with 1-2 Punch will make your next melee deal a lot more damage. Double damage to be exact. So we're gonna build upon this as much as possible so each punch can become a nuke. So we're pairing this with an exotic class item with Spirit of Synthoceps. This will further increase your melee damage whenever you're surrounded by enemies. And you are punching things, so you'll probably be surrounded for this buff. And this effect is even stronger than 1-2 Punch, and it stacks with 1-2 Punch. So just between these two buffs, this melee goes from 8,000 damage to almost 50,000 damage. And it just gets higher from here. Then for the other perk on the exotic class item, you can go with Spirit of the Assassin to turn invisible with melees, Spirit of Caliban to make enemies explode from your melees, Inmost Light for faster abilities, or just Spirit of Galanor for faster supers, which is probably what I want the most. All of those perks are great, but they are not crucial to the build, so don't worry if you don't have the God roll. All you really need is Synthoceps. Another way to increase your damage is with a strong weaken effect like Tether. This will make enemies take 30% more damage on top of the buffs we already had. So you can definitely see how things start to add up. And we're using a grapple grenade because this actually counts as a melee, and it deals a lot more base damage than any other melee. And I learned this from Error's video on a similar build, but Stylish Executioner actually increases the damage of your melee before it even applies the weaken effect. So if you can activate 1-2 punch, then turn invisible, your next melee will deal a ton of damage. If you're invisible and then shoot, it'll take away the buff, but there is a way to make them stack. Basically, you want to get a bunch of enemies grouped up, tether them, shoot the boss with your shotgun to activate 1-2 punch, and then assuming a tethered enemy dies, Stylish Executioner will activate, then just grapple punch and you'll nuke the boss. All of that sounds complicated, but it's literally just tether, shoot, grapple. And the reason we aren't using combination blow is because it actually lowers the damage of Synthoceps, so it just isn't worth it. And you can optimize this by using Navigator to spam your grapple grenade over and over and melt bosses, but most people aren't going to do that. And by that, I mean, I'm too stupid to not mess that up. So what I run instead is Tractor Cannon. This applies the same debuff as Tether, and you can use it a lot more often. So the way it works with this is you just need to shoot a boss with Tractor Cannon, then shotgun, grapple, punch. You're not able to do the Omega punches like you can with Tether, but it still does a ton of damage and you can use it a lot more often. But that's not all, because we can squeeze a little bit more value out of all of our punches. We have Facet of Dawn to become radiant with each punch, which won't increase the damage of our melees, but it will increase the damage of the shotgun. And we have Facet of Blessing to heal after every melee kill, Facet of Protection to stay alive while you're in the middle of your fist fights, and we also have Facet of Balance and Facet of Hope to get our abilities back much faster. So once again, weaken enemies with either Tether or Tractor Cannon, shoot them with 1-2 punch, then grapple punch, and they're probably dead or close to it. As always, the full build is in the description if you want to copy it. You can jolt everything you encounter and stay alive very easily while you do so. This might be my favorite hunter build, and it's not even prismatic. Gifted Conviction is an exotic chess piece that a lot of people overlooked, but it's actually insane. Activating Ascension or Tempest Strike throws out bouncing explosives that will jolt everything they deal damage to. And you get damage resistance each time you jolt an enemy, whether it be from this or another source. So obviously we're using Ascension and Tempest Strike to apply jolt to everything, as well as Spark of Shock to jolt things with our grenades, and we're using Indebted Kindness. This is a special ammo sidearm with Volt Shot, so we can also apply jolt with this. And because it's a special weapon, we can take advantage of Spark of Beacons to blind enemies after every kill while we're amplified. We're jolting everything, you better be amplified all the time. We also have Spark of Resistance for damage resistance while near enemies. So not only are you getting a damage resistance from your exotic, but you're also getting it from Spark of Resistance, and enemies won't be able to shoot you since they're going to be blinded. So staying alive is extremely easy. Now for the exotic, you can run pretty much whatever you want, but I went with Thunderlord because it's great for ad clear, great for single target damage, it benefits from all the arc mods we're using, and it can also blind enemies while we're amplified. Feel free to swap this out if you want to, but I really enjoyed using it. Overall, I think the build speaks for itself. All the Chain Lightning will kill everything very quickly, and since we're stacking so many resistances, it's kinda hard to die in most activities. This next build blows up everything with just one shot, but you'll have to click on this video to see how. Thanks for watching, I'm Marshix, and I'll see you next time.